Welcome to the Dystopian
Hello.
Futures. I hope you enjoyed
Hello,
your journey.
everybody. How are you?
For the next
How are
5
you?
weeks.
Welcome to the Dystopian Futures. I hope you enjoyed your journey. Just like that playback was saying, this is Dystopian Futures, and for the next 4 weeks now, we're going to be talking about everything destiny, looking at what the future holds for us creatively. Today I have a very special guest, so I'm going to start adding her while I do a little bit of an intro. Today we're talking about the future of activism, and to me it's a really, really important topic, especially nowadays. Hey, how you doing, Liv? How you doing?
Good. How are you? It's good to see you.
You, so good to see you. It's been ages. So
Really?
me and Liv actually met, gosh, this was about 2.5 years ago, was it?
Yeah,
At Sheffield Documentary Festival. I was doing a show with Geica, and it was quite a, I don't know, it tickled a lot of people up the wrong way. We did a live score for a film. Some people hated it, some people loved it. Liv loved it, and then I was like, yo, girl, I need to understand who you are. So today we're going to be talking about the future of activism, and when I was thinking and programming this, I thought Liv would be the perfect person, because ultimately I always see her all the time, like pushing hard. So, you know, just to do a real quick intro, she's a key figure in UK kind of political art, and for me I think it's going to be a really interesting chat, because not only is she fighting kind of queer and feminist rights through her poetry and performance, but she is also like taking a lot of political action. And that's what we need right now, isn't it?
Amen.
So, yes, Liv. Do you want to introduce yourself? I think that's like the best way to start, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, sweet. So yeah, I'm Liv Wynter. Sorry, I'm a little bit like, I just ran through the door from work. Yeah. I'm a performance artist. I used to do a lot of poetry, dipped my toe into theatre last year, but outside of that as well, I do a lot of political organising. I've worked with a lot of different direct action groups, and at the moment my main day-to-day is doing frontline support work for young people with mental health, and also at a homeless shelter. So doing a bit of all of it really, but yeah.
Mate, I get kind of confused with myself when I'm like, all right, okay, I've got to do my washing, and then I have to do that song, and I'm like, Jesus, my day is like so busy. And then you say stuff like this, and I'm like, this is all the stuff I think about in my mind and then haven't done yet. So slap my wrist, and this is the time to start everybody just shouting and doing and screaming from the rooftops and getting that action in them.
It takes organised Google Calendar. You need a good Google Calendar.
You need a really good Google Calendar. You're so right. You know, just kind of looking at it, because you've touched on all of the kind of facets of what you're doing at the moment, and I wanted to kind of start at the beginning, just so people get an understanding of like why political art. You know, like, why did you decide to sit in political art? Why?
Yeah, I guess for me, I didn't really realise I was making political art until someone else was like, this is a bit much. And then I was like, oh, okay, touched a nerve, that's fine.
What was too much? What was
I think, like in third year of uni at Goldsmiths, it was the first time I did like a piece of spoken word. And like it was a really angry piece. And it was like a spoken word about how someone had been like harassing me in a pub, and then in the spoken word piece, loads of like gangsters, like Italian suited mafia gangsters, descend on the pub and like take away this like person. So very fantasy. But yeah, lots of people were like, that's weird.
What? I just don't think they know what they're talking about, mate. Like,
yeah,
that's it's not for you.
But that's the dream as well, you know. Someone's swooping in and being like, I'm gonna take all of this drama away. So did that for a bit, and like I think like, yeah, once I started getting into spoken word, I was writing a lot of stuff about being a survivor, and like that obviously resonates with other people who've been through the same thing. So it kind of like fell into political art. I just guess through just talking about yourself, if you've lived a life where you've experienced shit, you're going to end up doing political stuff at the end of it.
This is true. And when you say survivor, if you don't mind me asking, what a survivor of?
Yeah, I guess survivor of domestic violence, and also like was homeless for a little while. So kind of just those two things, and those two things obviously like feed into each other quite a lot. So yeah, survivor of domestic violence was definitely what I started making work about. I still make work about it, but in like a very different way. Like before, when I started writing, it was like trauma. And actually, as a performer, if you're doing that 4 nights a week, it's not good for you. So I kind of stopped how I was writing about it and changed it up a bit. But yeah.
No, you're so right. And this is it. With art, it is a way to get out, isn't it? And it's also just a way to basically like release any of them traumas. And like you said, you've lived a really rich life for being so young. So this was like therapy. You know, I think a lot of the things that you've just kind of set up will set us up for the rest of the conversation as well, 100%. And thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, Lena says thank you for sharing. By the way, everybody, please ask questions, comment. We're here just to have an open discussion, and that's what this is about today. So please feel free to chime in and ask any questions that you want to Liv or myself. You know, the political art. So obviously you went in, tried to deal with all of the shit that had been happening previously from streets, domestic violence. Then how did political art then turn into activism then? Because you're saying a story, but how do you switch it and actually like motivate yourself to actually do something?
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the first gigs that I had that really changed my life was I got booked to play our Sisters Uncut fundraiser, and I didn't really know who they were, and I turned up to this fundraiser, and it was like a group of women and non-binary people who were campaigning against the cuts to domestic violence services throughout the UK. Yeah, and obviously they booked me because I was talking about that stuff anyway, but I didn't know that people were organising around it. So once I was there, and in that moment, I was like, oh, there's so much more I can be doing. Like art is amazing, but art by itself I don't really think is enough. You need to have all the work that goes around it, all the access into it. All of that stuff together is what actually leads to like radical change. So I kind of fell into activism through doing that, and did some actions with sisters. My first ever like political anything was doing a squat. I went straight in at the deep end and was like, let's take over a building.
What building was it?
I took over.
Because
you know, we took over what's it called? The big pizza place in Peckham.
Where? I'm shit with self. Don't kill me, everybody. Terrible stuff.
Yeah, they were booking out. Hang on, I'm just gonna
I want the big pizza place in Peckham. You're gonna.
Wi-Fi's a bit glitchy.
Oh, don't worry. If you put it on Wi-Fi, if you take it off Wi-Fi, it should be better. I want to know about this big pizza place in Peckham because, like, two things. Maybe it had some, like, spare dough in it. Then it also had the space, so it just made it a perfect place to actually put bloody squat. How long were you squatting for there? Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm back. Are you? I don't know whether it's me or you that's dodgy. Sorry.
No, don't worry. How long were you squatting for then? There.
We were there for ages. We had it down for like 4 or 5 weeks. We opened it as a social centre, and it was like just run by a group of sisters, and we were just campaigning. The campaign was, how can she leave if she has nowhere to go? And it was just like trying to make obvious how much empty space there is in London when there's no refuges really available for people, and just trying to be like, look, if you give the buildings to the community, like this is what's possible and this is what we can do with it. But we were there for a while. It was a long, wild time in my life.
I can imagine. So many parties, so much fun. Is Sisters Uncut still running now then?
Sisters Uncut still going. There's a north, a southeast, and a north, southeast. And I think that's it. SEL, North. There's another one, but I can't remember where. But yeah, they are still running. They're still organising. They put out some really good information today, actually, about mutual aid networks and mutual aid groups, which is really...
Because COVID, I can imagine, is the worst nightmare for anybody who has any issues at home, you know, ranging whatever. So I read some really like disturbing stats the other day, and I was just, what Sisters Uncut is doing is just like so powerful. So anybody who's just joining, we're talking about Sisters Uncut, and it is a platform for women who suffer in domestic violence, and that is based in London. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's in London.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, and like talking about your wild squat times. Like, it makes me just want to throw an illegal party, which is naughty, but it's so true. So, okay, let's fast forward and come to today, and let's just talk about kind of what issues get you angry today then, and like what are you doing about that?
Oh, what doesn't get me angry now? Like, once you start to learn about how fucked up everything is, you're like, wow, there is so much to change and so much to do. But I feel like I'm still like trying to organize a lot and still like build community, like, and get involved with kind of grassroots stuff. Both my jobs are like they're like paid roles, but in grassroots organizing. And then I guess just staying in touch with people. It's a really weird time to be organizing, because like all you want to do when you organize is sit in a room of people and plan and think about whose rooms you can storm. But like, there's not going to be any storming of buildings for a little while, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know, right? So I read today that some people were gathering outside the Met police station to hug. Wait, there was 20 of them. I think we should have just gone for somewhere not outside the Met police station and just did it in private. But 20 of them were like, it's all right, it's our body. So people are still screaming. But I don't know if that was a good thing. They were hugging. And then they had placards. We'll come to that in a bit, actually. Well, the thing is, I know, madness. There is so many things to be mad about, and you are completely right there. I think when I think about, like, what are the things that, like, really, really get my goat, it is, like, forced deportation and our kind of, like, handling of people who want to come into the country, refugees. Mm-hmm. And there's so many charities, there's just so much happening at the moment that, I think COVID wiped that kind of half away from my mind for a slight second. Do you know what I mean? But then now I'm actually coming around to the fact that, like, this is our new reality, and we need to be able to still fight for what we wanted to fight for in the past. Let's talk about some of your projects, because I know they cover everything from, like, I think let's talk about the bunker one. That would be an interesting one, actually.
Yeah, for sure. So the bunker show was called And So the Choir Gathers Before It's Too Late, and it was an anti-fascist musical using all the music of the specials and the like two-tone movement, which was like working class movement between like people of color and white people who were like anti-fascist and campaigning against the National Front, particularly like it was a really big movement in South London, and in obviously the Battle of Lewisham, which was like a big fight between anti-fascists and fascists. So we like worked on this musical. Stoll didn't play the rights for the specials, but we did use their music all the way through. Had like a live band, and it was just kind of bringing together all these people who weren't trained performers, but that I had met like on the scene. So there was like someone who was like just like a radical guy I'd met in the pub who was a plumber. There was like a couple of care workers. There were just some punks and squatters, and I was like, come and be in this play. Let's just like talk about what our lives are about. Let's play some of our favorite songs that we would put on in the pub, and like try and encourage people who have, like, we particularly wanted to encourage like older generation, like people who used to be skinheads or used to be like in these scenes who have grown up and kind of a bit conservative. We were like, where did you lose your way? Like, can we get you back to like being radical? But it was really fun. It was really amazing to work with people that aren't trained, because like the demands are so different, and when you're trying to put those voices on, you just got to trust them to speak for themselves and stuff. And having a live punk band in a show was like so fun and like really, really good to do. But yeah, it was basically like Arts Council funded anti-fascist propaganda that we did.
This is great. Wait, I was just about to say, Arts Council fund anti-fascist propaganda. Okay, good for me to know in like 2021 when they bring that funding back. Do you know what I mean? What are we going to do to them? Ridiculous. That sounds amazing, and especially like the mix between music, like untrained performance, and just people getting on and doing it. Because what it is, it's just method acting after a while. Is it? Well, it's them acting out their lives. Like it's not even, they say it's method acting, but it's nothing. It's literally them just showing how it feels to be them. And I think that's such a beautiful mix of activism and art that, like, I wish I had seen it 100%.
It was really fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was super fun. And also, like, there was something in it where it was just like, what does it mean to work with people whose whole lives aren't creatives? Because you can't do a normal rehearsal period. You can't put them in a theatre for a month because they won't have a job to go back to if they're like normal minimum wage workers. So it was like we were having to rehearse like 1-2 days a week, or having to like rehearse late at night and do all this stuff that like really not the normal procedure, because we weren't working with people whose whole life was performance. And actually, like, unless we find ways to work with people who aren't, like, to include people that aren't just sole performers, we're never going to get the full story of anything. We need to, like, bring those people in and see how they can inform an art practice and be part of it.
100%, because, like, some people would think that, you know, theatre and art and political art is, like, really quite elitist still in its perspective, you know, because you have to have had the money to go to college. You're not listening to the people of the ground. And, you know, if we look at what happened with the Brexit vote and voting for Conservatives, you had a load of like socialist northern towns who would be more this kind of working class kind of conversation that you're talking about, vote for something that might not be in their best interest. And that was a mixture of people from the socialist, like, northern classes, and then also the more affluent southern, like, older generation. And you're right, how do you start bringing the elders round to a more liberal view when everybody does get more conservative in their older age? So did you write that then?
Yes. Yeah, so it was a written work, and it had just these other punk songs in. So we like wrote the middle bits, and everyone had like a little bit of like monologue that they worked in. So we had a scene in it that was called My Racist Friend, which is a song by the Specials about people who just allow their racist friends to be racist. And it was really cool because it was like the band were like playing it in the background, and then we had all the different people that we brought in who were like affected by racism write all these monologues. And it started as this joke where they were like taking the piss out of people and everyone's laughing along. And then as the song got like heavier, all the monologues turned into like being like, this isn't funny and you shouldn't be laughing, and look at you in your nice theatre coming along to laugh at us about our trauma. And then that scene ends with like all of the cast like leaving the theatre, and the cast go and have an interval, and all of the audience have to just like sit in their guilt for like 10 minutes. But it's just like nice. It was really interesting. Nice. Oh.
Carry on.
I was going to say also, like, there was something about using the music of the Specials that was so nostalgic to that time. Once you started to have that music on, there was a lot of older people that sunk back into like that period of their life where they were listening to that at home, angry about these causes. And I think seeing people still angry and still using those same kind of like rebel songs and like these references, it was like pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really nice. You know, obviously that day to now, kind of censorship has changed quite dramatically. Some things are like that were okay to say then are really not okay to say now. How do you think, this is an off-topic thing to say, but how do you think that actually affects the fight against activism, when I think a lot of people probably still think these things, but they don't say it anymore, and then they don't end up saying it to, you know, they don't end up having an open conversation about it. They'll go and try and find other people who might think that, and then it just becomes this like unspoken thing, and then a real clear divide between two people. Whereas before, I don't know, I felt like it would just be better for people to talk about it, and we could kind of start activating on a ground level instead of it becoming this massive issue before it's even being talked about.
For sure. I feel like one thing, like growing up obviously as like working class person in the community I was in, like the conversations that people would have in the pub are like often really transformative. These like the conversations where someone might say something a bit weird, but if you're kind of patient with it, you can have a good like transformative chat. I guess it's all about like who has those conversations and who's willing to do it, because you know it often falls on the people that bear the oppression to do the teaching. That's like not very helpful. Like I don't know, I did a queer feminist 2-week residency in an all boys private school, and that was like so eye-opening as to how you can have these conversations with people that are like, I guess it's younger people, so it's slightly different, but people who really just were not on the same page, that were like well up for talking about it, said some fucked up shit, thought about it, came days later and went, that was pretty weird. And like, you know, like it's possible to have that growth. Like you just need support systems around you. I mean, I'm not saying everyone should go out and chat to their local fascists, obviously, but like
chat to local fascists. No, I'm joking. Sorry, the internet. That's not what we were thinking.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This is it. Like having that open conversation, and you being able to be in a position that you can go into these schools and have this open dialogue, I think is really, really important. Everybody who's joining us at the moment, please feel free to ask your questions. How did you even land that residency? Aitor says.
Well, it was before I had any face tattoos, and it was I turned up when I did the interview. I wore a really nice white blazer and some like smart Doc Martens and looked very like normal, and then I turned up on day one like in some like ripped jeans and like an offensive t-shirt and was like, hey.
You were like, hey, I got a face tattoo just this weekend. Love it. So glad that you hired me. Yes. Playing punk all the way down. Yeah. No, you're completely right. Yeah. You know, thank you for that point as well. I think it's really interesting just to see how you are engaging older people and engaging the community, because I think that's one thing that I want to think about next time for any art project that I think about, how to bring I really always think about marginalized communities in terms of race, but you know, in the UK we're so split, race, class, we're split everything. And you know, I think coronavirus is something that is showing us how prevalent our class divide and race divide is. You know, I was reading an article the other day, I think it was in The Guardian, and it was basically saying that with coronavirus, you're like nearly 5 times more likely to die if you're black. And that is a systemic problem that we have in our system that's making black people and mixed people of color basically like at least 3 times more likely to die than their white counterparts. And if people think that we haven't got a problem anymore, these kind of facts can definitely be there to tell them that the problem is still 100% real. So how are your communities getting affected by coronavirus? You know, the communities that you're caring about at the moment.
I think one of the most like important things that we've seen, or like 2 important things we've seen, is, as we touched on earlier, like domestic violence survivors, but also queer people who both those categories, people who are being forced to live in houses that aren't safe. They might be living with an abusive partner, abusive parent, or they might be a queer person who's not out to their family and they're having to live like in isolation at home in this like horrible experience. But also another like way that like the queer community is being really affected, particularly like the homeless queer community, which is like where I work, is people rely on, like, queer people, when we're homeless, we become this thing. This is like hidden homeless, which is like where you're sofa surfing, you're staying at the club, you might be doing survival sex work, and you fall through all these gaps because you aren't necessarily on the street, but you still are homeless. And that's becoming like really intensified because now it is not safe to do that. You can't be on a grinder hookup, you can't go to the club for 3 days, like it's just not happening. So those people now are very, very high risk and very vulnerable. And I think survivors of domestic violence, the statistics are awful as to like how people are experiencing stuff now. It's really scary.
Yeah, it is scary. It is really scary. You know, like, let's talk about the Outside Project, actually. I think that would be a perfect time to talk about it. So the Outside Project is for people who are homeless and queer. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's the UK's only LGBTIQ plus homeless shelter and community centre. So we're the only one that specialises in the UK.
Okay, and did you start that as well?
No, I've only been there a few months. I volunteered a little bit before, but no, they've been running long without me. The person who started is called Carla, and they're absolutely amazing, a big inspiration for me. And then my best friend worked there for a little while before I got into it. But I've been there I've been there since the service went 24 hours. So before it was just a night space, and now it's a day space too. So I'm one of the day staff there.
Okay, nice. And I was reading about the Outside Project, and basically they crowdfunded 11.5 grand, right, to create a bus that drove round, and people could basically go and sit into the bus and sleep there at night. You know, I can imagine that's providing so much solace for not only homeless, but being queer on the streets as well. I'm sure you're probably susceptible to a lot more kind of violence as well, just being in such a vulnerable position. So that's beautiful, and I'm really glad that you're part of that. And anybody who would like to hear more about any of the kind of businesses or the organizations we're talking about, we'll definitely leave some comments and we will share it after if you want any links to any of these businesses as well. Sorry, somebody said, there aren't really any big left-wing movements in the UK. That's true. What do you think about that?
I think that I think it's a really hard time to think about left as a movement because of kind of how shit Labour's gone in the last couple of weeks. Like, obviously there was such a big campaign that was built around Jeremy Corbyn, and when that kind of collapsed, actually what's left in his place is a load of shit, really, unfortunately. But I just think maybe that we don't always see left-wing groups, because a lot of them are really community based. So for example, there's a really thriving Lewisham mutual aid network, and maybe someone who's in a really thriving mutual aid network in East London doesn't think they're part of a movement, but actually what they're doing is the same practice. They're just not connected to each other. So mutual aid, for example, I would say is a really big left movement at the moment, but all of the groups are working autonomously in their local areas because to branch out would be effective. So that is in itself a movement. There's lots and lots of organising, like you said earlier, against illegal deportation. There's stuff happening, and there's a big anti-fascist movement kind of in the main cities. Like here, Liverpool's got a really big anti-fascist movement. So there is stuff going on, but I guess one big cohesive movement doesn't always lend itself to the kind of organising we want to do. Labour are never going to come out and say abolish prisons. It's not going to happen. So the more so it's can something can a political party really be what we need? Because when I was really sad about Labour not getting in, my friend was like, you need to just get over it, because even if they got in, we would still have prisons and the police, and you would still be fighting against that. And I was like, that is so true.
Because they're not going to take away what they class as democracy, which is the whole structure in the system. And I think that you've touched on some really good points there, actually. So it's about, you now are saying it's more local activism instead of national activism or global activism. That's what's counting at the moment, basically.
I just think it's I don't know. I feel like any time your movement starts to drift from the ground, it's not always, once you lose touch with where everything's come from. There are international movements, I guess, Union, for example. Unions are organising and having wins, and they're international. I'm part of IWW, and they're international, and they have wins kind of globally. But yeah, I guess I can't think of anything that's super. The causes, I guess what I'm trying to say is the causes are global. Deportation, racism, white supremacy, classism. The causes that organising are global, but perhaps the ways in which we tackle it are sporadic and not always part of a network. Does that make sense?
Laura Hone says she totally agrees. Do you think we could link up mutual aid groups? Because it feels like such an opportunity at the moment, and to spread awareness that austerity is bad.
Yeah, I suppose there would be a way, I have to say, because I'm 6 days a week frontline, so I'm not at all involved in my local one. I just know that they are smashing it, and I see it online and see that stuff's going well. I guess there's loads to be learned from each other. When Sisters Uncut went from London to kind of a few others popped up around the UK. Sisters from London would there visit and skill share, but obviously we're not really in a visiting and skill sharing position at the moment. So
no, this is it. And maybe that kind of brings us on to the next bit then, to talk about how can we do activism now that you know, obviously, like with the Corona bill and stuff, it stopped people from gathering. So mass gatherings were cut. And a lot of people thought, well, that's our human rights getting taken away from us, because our freedom of speech to march and to gather and to protest have gone. So, you know, how are you seeing activism now if it's not on the streets, which is kind of the traditional way of looking at it?
Yeah, I suppose that's been like a big thing for me, is that like normally a lot of my sense of purpose and like well-being comes from doing like kind of grassroots, like naughty, spiky activism. That's where I get my kicks from, let's be honest. And like it's not really happening now, and like we're having to come to terms with that, and also come to terms with the fact that like direct action might have to change its shape. And I think what's interesting is that a lot of people are like, oh, it's fine, we just take it all online. But actually, you're exiling like whole massive groups of your community if you do that. Like, there's so many people that don't use Facebook or Instagram or anything like this. And so we're having to think a lot about that. I think at the moment, the best things people can do is like join a union, get involved with that, get involved with a local mutual aid group, be supportive to people who are involved with them, people who are doing frontline work, and just generally like at the moment, the most bad thing you can do is like stay home and not go out and like resist temptation. Obviously it's a lonely, shitty time. And I think there's so much pressure online for it. It's like, you could write your novel, you could learn 7 languages. And it's like, no, you could just stay at home and accept the fact it's actually not that fun, and that's what's up.
Yeah, and you can stay in bed and get like all that rest that you wanted to get all that time. Do you know, like last year, I was praying for some downtime, but now that it's come, I don't think I understood what downtime meant like this. You know, now we have all the time in the world to do absolutely nothing, but all at the same time we have all the time in the world to look up what is actually annoying us and what we need to do about it, and start linking with these groups as well, like you're talking about. Because before I started researching the work that you've been doing, I hadn't heard of these organizations, and it was like pretty perfect, because there are so many charities out there here to help. And anybody who does feel like they want to get involved in activism and charity work, please have a look now, because it's the perfect time to do it, definitely. You know, how do you think technology is affecting activism?
I think like in lots of ways it's amazing the things that can happen today. So like one of the things that I work on is on Friday nights we have a house party online, queer house party.
Yes.
And that's been really amazing. It's really fun, and like it's a bit silly, and it's just super punk, and like you can just turn on the computer from your flat and like rock out with all your friends, and that's really amazing. Like there are beautiful moments like that. Like doing that stuff online is great. Organizing online, I think, is just generally like not very safe, because like anyone can. It's not hard to find someone's emails or texts or whatever. So I still think that's kind of dangerous. And I feel like there's a lot of like language around activism that I'm not massively into, in terms of like visibility, where like people want to be on the front of a magazine and say they're an activist because they're just like drawing a spotlight to like, I don't know, just who they are and stuff, and I don't really know if that it's not what I'm into, basically. Like I'm not saying it's bad, but it's certainly not what I'm into. And I think the more digital activism becomes, the more we end up just seeing like people in nice shoes saying like easy one-liners, and it's like, you know, there's people who are the spokesperson of movements that they have no understanding of, and it's like, how did you get to be the person who gets on TV and says that when you don't know any of the people that are organising on your road about that, you know?
100%.
So that stresses me out a little bit.
It's basically influencer culture again, though, isn't it? And like we're so stuck in wanting to look at pretty people who do pretty things, and then they have a conscience as well, and that's just the next thing to get people hooked in. So completely understand that doesn't bode well, especially for people who are actually activists and doing things about it. But what do you think about getting them to just push more, kind of shine a light more on what you're doing? Maybe that's the way of looking at it.
I think it's useful. I'm like,
you're like,
no, I think it's useful.
guys. Just give me the light, mate.
I think it's useful. I do think it's good to have it's good to have a spotlight on things, but it's also just a bit like, I don't know, it's like, the thing about services I find a lot is that like people do find them when they need them. Like they do often appear to people when they need them, and it's like, for example, if we put the Outside Project on BBC News, that's obviously amazing. We're going to get loads of like extra money from that. People will donate to the fundraiser, and that's always really, really good. And that's really vital. It also gets us a wave of people who email us like, how can we help, but don't actually want to put any work in. So you'll be like, oh, we need, like, Christmas Day is the best example. Christmas Day, hundreds of people want to volunteer. Do they want to volunteer any other day of the year? No. We need people around. Like, I don't need you on Christmas Day. Like, we need you all the time. That's what community is. It's not, you don't turn up on Christmas Day, take your selfie with the people that are like having a hard time. Like, no.
And then leave, like, poverty tourism, basically, though, isn't it?
Exactly, it's trash. Yeah, I think it's shit, and I think that social media thrives on that. Social media loves a sob story.
No, they do. And I was literally talking to my friends the other day about reality TV and how that also needs that sob story for people to be interested. And we're all just focusing on the same formula now. Do you know what I mean? For any kind of TV or whatever, and it's boring. It's so funny.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was looking, I walked past where near I live, actually, in Hackney the other day, and it was Soup Kitchen on a Sunday, and I don't think I've ever seen the Soup Kitchen before, but now the queues were down the road, and all I have to say is, you know, in this last 6-7 weeks, the kind of demand for people to get free food and get kind of aid and all of that has skyrocketed, especially in our area, which I don't class as one of the like more poor areas in Hackney either. So it just made me realize that I really need to get up and do something about it myself and like just start dedicating my time, you know. So Liv, I'm listening. I'm going to be the poster child. I'm going to be the girl in the shoes like, oh my God, yeah, so in Hackney we've got like, all of this problem. You're going to be like, fuck off. Please don't shout me down, right, when I do that. Okay. You told me things what not to do. What not to do. You know what I want to talk about? One thing that I saw you posting about, and I didn't really know much about it, was the May Day riots. And I feel like this is something every wannabe activist and anybody should know anyway. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh gosh, so May Day is just like historically a day where lots of people organise and do stuff, and historically it's a day for unions. If you look up, I'm not going to be able to spiel it off the top of my head, but if you look up the Haymarket, then you will find loads of information about what May Day was and why it formed. But like, yeah, historically it's a day for people to strike, to demand better working conditions for themselves and for others. And yeah, obviously, like, so, well, not obviously, but normally there are big demos in London on May Day, and it's kind of a big thing left, and everyone, like, people organise for a long time around this day because historically it's had wins and stuff. So, yeah, this time, obviously, everyone was like, well, what the hell do we do? We can't go to Central and, like, rob a bank. We're not allowed anymore. So...
Off on each of the process. You can't do that now. You're not allowed. Well, you can.
Yeah. So now it's like a good thing, like a nice thing that happened recently, where like lots of people putting banners in their windows, and that for me was like a real beautiful thing on May Day. Like coming home from work and seeing loads of like solidarity banners in people's windows around the NHS, around frontline workers, around migrants in the UK. How important like. Even if they weren't important and valuable, obviously, like, people should be allowed to be where the fuck they want. But, like, nice solidarity with working people. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's, like, a very big day for anarchists and stuff. So it was... and we did a queer house party that day, and it just felt... Nice. I felt like I'd satisfied my urge to, like, be around my people, you know? But, yeah, definitely, like, worth looking into and, like, learning a bit about it, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, because when I didn't really know much about it, I was looking and I just thought, wow, how do I not know about this? It's not hasn't been taught to me. Obviously, it wouldn't get taught to us in schools or anything like that, but it's just so important for people to actually understand their power, and everybody in the country coming together on one day is fantastic. You know, what was I at? Was it, I think I was at a racism march it must have been a while ago. Sorry, it was an anti-Brexit march. I was at that about 6 months ago, and I was thinking to myself, like, well, how can people actually just really stop and actually like take affirmative action? And I think for me, I feel like now even more than ever, the action could definitely come from the likes of Labour striking, because it feels like if we can't get together, isn't Labour striking going to be the key thing that would actually, I don't know, like make people sit up and listen that we're a collective body?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, sorry, I'm just putting my phone on charge. I think that like striking Labour is so important, because often when you have nothing left that you can take from someone, a boss, from someone in power, what's the last thing you can take? So often that's your Labour. Like when you've taken everything else, you're not being friends with them, you haven't got your way. All you can really do is go on strike as a group of people and be like, we won't stand for this anymore. And it's really frustrating actually, because I think that like in terms of like what's happening with COVID, there was attempts to organise a rent strike, and it kind of, unless like thousands and thousands of people do it, it's not going to be a thing, because people doing it in isolated circumstances won't work. Which is so frustrating, because we need a rent strike. We really need that. We're paying like fucking £500 to live in a room with 10 other Londoners. It's horrible. And then getting docked pay, and the landlords who don't have jobs and just own houses are saying you owe us 100% of your money when we're only earning 80% of it. Yeah, it's such a fuck.
This is the thing as well, and people, I didn't know if people really believed it was going to go on for so long when it started. So I think when people were like, okay, we're going to get a 3-month mortgage holiday, or we're going to get a 3-month, like, I don't know, maybe like 50% off your rent or whatever, everybody was like, okay, sweet, that's going to be great. But now that we're actually looking at how long this will actually go on for, you do realize that we needed to be pushing more affirmatively to stop us from being in the shit, you know what I mean? Because this isn't just a 3-month thing. It could be until the end of the year. It could be next year. Who knows? So, yeah, basically, I think you're right. We needed to push harder there. If
and also, like,
now, carry on.
Yeah, to say, like, also what we've learned, again, like, the very hard way, is that, like, I've been traveling and doing frontline work from when lockdown happened. So I haven't, like, been working. I've worked from home on one job, but I've been at the shelter. And then obviously in the last week, now everyone is like, loads of people are being forced to travel. It's really unsafe conditions again. Like, and we're learning actually the brutality of how little rights workers have, because the smallest, like, Boris has said, I don't want to lose money for all of you poor people. Go back to work, and everyone's had to do it because we don't have enough rights to say that I don't want to be here. I want to be safe. I want to be at home.
Yeah. Did you read about that train driver? She was a black lady who somebody spat on her and she died. Just like,
it's so fucked.
It's really fucked, and especially the people who are like just of low income, they're going to be really struggling now because they have the option to go back to work, but that could be a death sentence for a lot of people as well, so it's not that great. Hey everyone who's just joined, we are talking about the future of activism, so welcome. If you have any questions, please feel free to write your comments and we will read them out and we will do our best to answer them. You're joining me and Liv Wynter, and we are talking about how we can mobilize now when people can't really get together. So that is our talking point. I just, it feels a bit bleak, right? Everything feels very bleak. But we still have social media. We have the ability to do these conversations. We have the ability to congregate, and to create collective action. And I think that is something that we need to take out of this as really positive.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But talking about, all the stuff that you're doing at a local level, I really appreciate. And I think people who have been watching this will also appreciate it too. You work for a company called Hearts and Minds. What is that?
Yeah. So Hearts and Minds is a peer support network for young people who struggle with their mental health. But basically, so it's for 14 to 25-year-olds. But the reason I got into peer support or find it interesting is that it's very anti-state. And I think something that's quite interesting in activism is that when in the 70s, kind of campaigning around mental health was equal kind of ground with campaigning around women's rights and black rights and emancipation of people. It was all kind of on one thing. And actually, the more that mental health became so entrenched in capitalism, people stopped organizing around it in the same way. And peer support's super radical because it's we all know actually that if someone is going through a crisis, the last thing anyone should do to that person is lock them up without their consent in a space and not allow them to be the person that they are. And so peer support's really changed how I think about things, because it's how do we mental health is a community issue. So much of the reason why people get sectioned is because there's one person left who's trying to look after that person, and that one person doesn't have the anymore. But if it was a community thing, if there's a group of 10, 15 people looking after this person, it becomes so much more healing and bearable. And so the Hearts and Minds group is basically trying to be that, a group of people who've come together because they struggle with their mental health, but who want to look after each other outside of the state without calling the cops, without calling ambulances, without getting people sectioned. If that has to happen, and it hasn't in my experience, then I guess we would see. But the intention is very much for people to look after each other, and just to re-radicalize around mental health. I think it's so important. People, it's so interesting that we know mental health is diagnosed by rich white dudes, and we just accept it. We're yeah, cool, I've got this, I've got that. BPD is only diagnosed to queer people and women, and it's it's just what even is that? It's so fucked up.
And a lot of people don't really even know what these things are. They're just oh, okay, you're suffering from a base level. A lot of people will just be well, you're suffering from depression and that's it. Do you know what I mean? But having personal experiences with depression, and also knowing people who have BPD and stuff like that, it's so important now to be able to actually decompartmentalize what is actually wrong in your mind, so you know how to actually treat yourself. So I think that's completely right. That sounds like such a beautiful project, actually. And are you doing everything online now, basically? Is that it? Because you can't go and meet them.
Yeah, so we're completely online now. We're super online, which is good. So before we met up in Wimbledon Library, and obviously it's really nice and important to see people face to face and have that. But at the moment we're all on Zoom, which is I hate Zoom, but it is serving a purpose, and it's nice to see people. And at the moment we have four 1-hour sessions a week, and Hearts and Minds is cool because it focuses a lot on creativity, and so we do a lot of creative workshops on this understanding that sometimes you have a feeling that is too big or too weird to actually vocalize, and sometimes you might want to find another way to express that, which I guess both of us as performers, when I read that, I was that resonates with me so much. Sometimes that feeling is just too big for words, and you have to find another way to say it.
100%. It's funny because these feelings at the moment, they enabled me to write songs, but I really like projecting a whole feeling in a world that I create. Do you know what I mean? So people can, even if they don't verbally get it by what they hear, they can kind of take something away from the environment. And I think that to me is my activism, to tell people that I'm here and this is the story that I want to kind of portray, and hopefully other people can relate to it as well. And we just become a lot stronger together, basically. That's what I think.
Yeah, for sure.
With your peer-to-peer, so they all basically talk to each other and just be they egg each other on. Do you do egg each other on? I sound like I'm literally in preschool. Egg each other on, mate. Egg it. Literally, I'm here for it. We kind of got matching hair as well. Who knew? I think
I know.
My hair today, I must have been Yeah, Liv's got that half and half. I need to copy her. So, yeah. Oh my God. Do you do like projects then? Do you do like shows and stuff with the people in Hearts and Minds as well?
We have done like a show. They've done like a show before, but it's kind of like, it's less about, I don't know, it's more just about the process and like enabling people to like feel their feelings, and also like giving people something to do if they just want to be in the room and actually don't want to have a really intense experience. Like, you know, you can just draw, or I guess learning like, it's like artwork, like making work is just a new way to learn how to talk about yourself and how you feel and what you're experiencing. So shows definitely aren't there. Like, I don't think many of them would, although they all very much are, I don't think they would think of themselves as artists. They would be like people who just use like a creative medium to kind of express who they are and how they're feeling. But yeah,
they just need to write a poem about a pub, and then like the rest is history, mate. So it's fine. Like, they don't even know. They don't need to know. They'll get that calling. Just like, hiya, yeah, you're an artist now. Okay, cool. You know, I'm really glad that we were talking about Arts Council funding for you, actually, because I wanted to talk about funding cuts and to culture and art and how that will affect activism, basically. It's quite a big question, actually. How do you think,
yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it's like, in terms of how funding will affect activism, I suppose like the way, I suppose like people will always organize around funding cuts, and I think there has already like been some wins, like when I'm so out of the loop with like mainstream politics, but they wanted to take down the furlough amount to 60%, and then all of the unions were like, absolutely not, and now it's not happening. Furlough's been extended, but without the unions saying we're not fucking having this, it wouldn't have happened. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's so good. Okay. And like, it is happening. I guess this is what you're saying though, like a lot of this stuff goes on and people just don't even know that like decisions are being informed by like grassroots campaigners, but it is happening. I suppose like the problem is in like times like this where something happens that is a huge trauma for everyone, that's when they start to slide in little like laws and legislations when you're not looking, because you're thinking about something else. So they wanted to like they wanted to like take back gender neutral toilets and like people being able to self-identify to go into toilets. So like trans people using toilets, and just like nobody knew that they were having this discussion in Parliament because everyone was talking about COVID, which obviously is important, but they were fully just like, we're just gonna take back that law that we said was all right. It's like,
but why? It's just so, it seems so like small but large, you know, on the scale, and it's like, why are you trying to slide that in now? Yeah, no, you're not welcome. You're not welcome with that. No consent, motherfucker. No jokes.
Yes.
Well, no, I hear that, like, and especially with Brexit and things like that, you know, I know like there were grumbles in the queer community about how that would affect queer rights, basically, because a lot of the rights in the UK are based from European rights. That's what they were written from. And if they're starting to like revoke little things like gender neutral toilets now, it does kind of put that question up in the air of what else they'll be looking to revoke in future. So again, another horrible, grim topic. I think we've asked all the questions, actually, and I just want to say to people who have tuned in, do you want to answer any question? Do you want to ask any questions, to myself or Liv? Do you have anything burning inside of you that you want to get out? Not a UTI, just like something else. Like, if you got something that you want to give to us, please let us know, because we're here for it. And I will give them 2 minutes. But while people think about that, I think let's kind of think about our closing statements, basically. You know, Liv, what is the future of activism to you? How does it look?
I think that the whole time activism reminds itself that it is something that has always always, it has a rich history of winning. We win things. Like when people come together and they say this is fucked and I don't want it, there are so many stories in which we win things, and it's really hard to think about that right now because everything feels so fucking depressing. Yeah. That is the often times at which we are the most powerful. And I think if people just keep reminding themselves that actually just because we're locked in our houses, or some people are, it doesn't mean that all of this nasty shit has disappeared. Keep fighting, and also like you there will not be a revolution unless you get to know the people on your street, that person that takes the bus every day that you see, like smile at that person, like let's start building these because we need each other. And unless we actually like build that community, you need to know who your neighbors are, you need to know who drinks in your local, you need to know who shops in the shop, like, and it's really scary because as English people, or like English people are, they hate making friends, they hate talking to people,
especially
actually,
in London.
like, yeah, exactly. They hate it. And like marginalized communities actually bond over that thing where we can like spot each other a mile away, spot a queer person on the tube and you smile at them because their outfit is nice, you know? Those little moments are super vital at the moment. But I guess what activism looks like going forward is start small, start on your road. Like if there's not a mutual aid network where you live, you could start up today, you could print out a flyer today with a phone number on it that says, if you need something right now that you can't get yourself because you're isolating or you can't leave, call us, we'll drop it round. Like, you know, there's people on your road that might just need a bag of pasta and a bag of rice. And like, if you can do that, start it. Don't wait for someone else to ring you. Like, do it. Just print it out, do it. Put a banner in your window, say, if you need anything, we're here. Like, just make it obvious and like mean it from the heart. And also, sorry, this is quite a rant now.
No. This is what you're here for, babes. This is what you're here for. So don't worry. Crack on. We've got 2 minutes remaining before it cuts us off. So continue the rant.
My final part is just forgive yourself if you fuck it up. If you do something wrong, don't like let the guilt of it make you never ever leave your house again. If you do something wrong, you fuck up, just like say sorry, move on. You're gonna get it wrong. Everyone's doing it for the first time. Like do it and mean it. And I love you, Gloria, by the way.
You too. No, it's been fucking great to speak to you. It's really empowered me, and I hope it's empowered everybody else who's been like in and out and watching us during the last hour. And I want to say a massive shout out to Liv. I think everything that you've said, I wholeheartedly agree with. It's all about like being local now. We're grounded, so we may as well get to know the people on the street. When you're out and clapping on a Thursday, ask people who they are. What's your name? Yes. How can we get to each other? Are you in the local mutual aid group? If you are, let's chat and just start building that beautiful kind of scenario. And hopefully, you know, that win about furlough is massive. So hopefully, like, people are seeing that we do have the power now to continue. Hey, everyone, thank you so much for joining in to Dystopian Futures. My name is Gloria. This is Liv Wynter. And if you want to support Dystopian Futures, please feel free to PayPal me. And we will split this beautiful thing between us. It's a community. And it is PayPal me at Gloria with a 1 music. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed listening to this. No, don't you worry. And thank you everybody who came. Have an amazing evening, and thank you so much, Liv.